You know, we all have this picture in our heads of how the American West was won, right? It's all cowboys, six-shooters, and those long, dusty trails. But what if I told you the real story? The one about how the Southwest was actually built, wasn't just forged in the saddle. It was also hammered out in the courthouses and whispered in the halls of power. And at the center of it all, one family, the Ashursts. They didn't just shape the frontier with grit. They did it with gavels, with votes, and with a whole lot of ambition.
Yep. One family. That's the core of this whole thing, the Ashursts. Now, their roots, oh, they run just as deep as any pioneer you can imagine. But it's their branches that really changed everything, growing to cast a huge shadow over the entire political landscape.
And we're not talking about influence in just one little dusty town. No way. This family's reach stretched all the way across the raw, growing territories of Arizona and New Mexico. Think about that. Two future states whose destinies they were helping to write, right from the ground up.
So how did they do it? Well, they didn't just stick to one path to the top. As you're about to see, this family was smart. They carved out three totally distinct paths to power, and each one built on the one before it.
It started with the ranch. That's where they got that pioneer spirit, the grit to break the land. Then came the courtroom, which brought the order and authority to tame it. And finally, the Senate, giving them the national influence to truly define it. The ranch, the courtroom, the Senate. I mean, that is how you build a dynasty.
Okay, so let's get into it. Act 1. Our story really kicks off with the patriarch, William Henry Ashurst. You got to think of him as the root system, you know? He's the one who first planted the family's feet deep in that harsh, unforgiving Arizona soil, setting the foundation for everything to come.
So if you look at this timeline, you can see a life of just constant movement and serious challenges. I mean, that was pretty typical for a pioneer back then. But check out that 1887 entry. That's a huge deal. It's an early and super crucial step into politics. See, William wasn't just surviving on the frontier, he was starting to govern it. Big difference.
And then, decades later, we get this amazing, tangible link to that past from his son, Henry, who by this point is a U.S. senator. He writes in his diary about going back to the old family homestead, and what he finds is just a ruin, a ghost of where it all began.
This single sentence he wrote, wow, it just captures everything, doesn't it? You can almost feel the hardship, that image of the family huddled together by the fire, but you also get that deep, powerful sense of place that would become the driving force for this family for generations.
All right, so from that tough pioneer foundation, two of William's sons just skyrocket to prominence. But here's the thing, they took completely different paths to get there. This is really where the family's influence goes from a spark to an explosion.
And these two brothers, man, they perfectly show the two sides of the Ashurst coin. You've got Henry Fountain Ashurst, the smooth-talking, eloquent statesman in Washington, D.C. And then you've got his brother, Edward Bates Ashurst, this flamboyant, larger-than-life judge out in Oregon. It's wild, right? Same family, same DNA, but two totally different ways of wielding ambition and power.
Senator Henry, he was an absolute master with words. People said he had an almost Shakespearean grace. Get this, even after a really tough election loss in 1940, his farewell speech to the Senate wasn't bitter. It was this incredibly powerful defense of democracy itself. Just pure class, right to the very end.
And then you've got his brother Edward. His style, it was anything but restrained. When he announced he was running for the Senate, he just unleashed this tidal wave of over-the-top dramatic language. It wasn't just a speech, it was a full-on performance. Pure frontier showmanship.
Okay, let's zoom in on Edward for a minute, specifically his most notorious moment. We're going to open up a little case file here because this story proves that fiery frontier spirit was alive and kicking even inside a courthouse.
So, you're probably asking, what on earth drives a judge to get into a fistfight on his own courthouse steps? Well, it all kicked off because of something kind of boring, actually. A little dispute over an overtime pay claim from his own court clerk.
And from there, the whole thing just unfolded like a scene from some Wild West movie. It starts with a public dressing down in court, then escalates to an actual ambush on the courthouse steps. The clerk apparently beat the daylights out of the judge, so badly that Ashurst had to call a grand jury to his own bedside because he was too injured to go to them. This story was so nuts it even made it into Time magazine.
But here's the thing about history, right? Look how it gets cleaned up. Even with this huge national scandal, when you read his official obituary decades later, it's all neat and tidy. It just says he was elected a judge, a position he held for 6 years. The brawl? The scandal? Poof, completely gone.
So while William's sons are out there building their empires in Arizona and Oregon, the family's influence wasn't just stuck with them. There was this other branch of the family that was already a huge deal over in New Mexico, deep in the complicated politics of the territory. It just goes to show you how far this family network really stretched.
Let's talk about Merrill Ashurst. This guy was a huge player in Santa Fe. I mean, look at this. He was at the absolute top of the food chain, serving as both Attorney General and Speaker of the House. But, he was also a man of his time. He even got himself indicted for permitting gaming and had to pay a $5 fine. Just shows you, nobody was perfect.
So, you might be wondering, how do these two powerful family lines actually connect? Well, it's a classic family tree story. The Arizona line and the New Mexico line, they both sprouted from the same trunk, a man named Reverend Robin Ashurst. He had sons with 2 different wives, and that's where the branches split. This family wasn't just growing. You could say it was strategically expanding.
And this is where it all comes together. See, the crucial point here is that when you piece all these individual stories together, the pioneer, the senator, the judge, the territorial politician, you're not just looking at a family tree anymore. What you're really looking at is a blueprint for building influence and shaping an entire region of the country.
I mean, think about it. It all started in that one humble little pioneer cabin we saw. From there, the family's power just radiated outwards. They touched every single level of government you can imagine. They were there settling the frontier. They were running territorial governments. They were on the bench shaping state law. And yeah, ultimately, they were walking the halls of the U.S. Senate. It's an incredible story of growth.
And this, for me, is the real takeaway. That classic image we all have of the Wild West, it's really only half the picture. The Southwest was built just as much with law books, gavels, and backroom politics as it was with grit and individualism. And the Ashurst family, they are living proof of that. So that really leaves us with one final big question. One that kind of challenges that whole myth of the American West. When you look at the legacy of a family like the Ashursts, you have to wonder, what really won the West? What was the more powerful tool for forging this new American landscape? The 6-shooter or the law book? Something to think about.